It was a bright morning filled with the sound of birds and the smell of freshly cut grass. The sun was warm, and everything looked peaceful in the small neighborhood where the little girl lived with her parents. She was full of energy that day, just like any other morning. Her laughter filled the kitchen as her mother tried to braid her hair while her father packed her lunchbox. They were an ordinary family, living an ordinary life, unaware that this morning would change everything. Her mother reminded her not to forget her umbrella because it might rain later. The girl smiled, promised she wouldn't forget, and hugged both her parents tightly before leaving for school. She walked down the familiar path with her backpack bouncing behind her. Her mother stood at the door, waving until she disappeared around the corner. It was a small moment, but one that would stay frozen in her heart forever. The hours passed like any other day. Her father went to work. Her mother started cleaning and planning dinner. There was nothing unusual until the phone rang in the afternoon. It was the school office. The voice on the other end was calm but confused. They wanted to confirm if the girl was feeling sick because she hadn't shown up that day. For a moment, her mother didn't understand. She thought maybe there was a mistake. "No," she said. "She left home this morning." The person on the phone paused before quietly saying, "Then maybe you should come down here." That was the moment her world tilted. Her mother dropped the phone and ran out the door. She didn't even lock it behind her. She rushed to the school, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. Teachers, staff, and a few students were already looking around the school grounds, but no one had seen her daughter arrive that morning. The small gate by the road was open, and there were no clues about where she had gone. Her father reached the school minutes later, his tie loose and his face pale. They searched every hallway, every classroom, even the playground, calling her name again and again. Nothing. The police were called. Officers arrived quickly and began asking questions. What was she wearing? What route did she take? Did anyone see her on the way? Her parents answered with shaking voices, trying to stay strong, but deep inside, a cold fear started to grow. By evening, the whole neighborhood knew. Volunteers came with flashlights, walking through the streets, calling her name in the dark. The sound of her name echoed through the trees. Her mother refused to go home. She stood at the corner where her daughter was last seen, holding a photo in her hand, hoping she would come running back. But the night ended, and she didn't. Days turned into weeks. The posters with her photo were everywhere, on shop windows, bus stops, and community boards. Her parents barely slept. Her father spent his days at the police station, asking for updates, checking new reports, following every small clue, no matter how uncertain. Her mother waited by the phone, hoping it would ring with good news. But most calls were from strangers who thought they had seen someone who looked like her, only to find out later it wasn't her. At night, their home felt empty. The once cheerful walls were now silent. Her mother started leaving a small light by the window every evening. She said it was for her daughter, to help her find her way back home if she was out there somewhere. Her father didn't stop her. He understood. It became a quiet ritual, something that gave them strength to face the next day. The police tried everything they could. They searched nearby parks, checked security cameras, talked to everyone who had been around that morning. A few people remembered seeing a small figure walking near the crossing. But after that, nothing. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Her parents couldn't understand how such a thing could happen in their safe little town. Despite the endless pain, they refused to give up. They visited nearby cities, talked to the media, and begged anyone with information to come forward. Her father printed hundreds of flyers and handed them out at gas stations, stores, and bus terminals. Sometimes people would take them with sympathy. Sometimes they just nodded and moved on. But he kept going, because he couldn't stop. His hands would tremble from exhaustion, but his determination never faded. Her mother often sat in her daughter's room at night, holding her favorite teddy bear, whispering small prayers. She would picture her daughter's smile, her voice, her little jokes. Those memories hurt, but they also gave her a reason to keep breathing. She promised herself that no matter how long it took, she would keep searching. The seasons changed. Autumn came, then winter. Snow fell, covering the streets in white. Still, the small light in the window kept glowing every night. Her father would clear the snow from the front step each morning, as if he was preparing for her return. Their friends and relatives tried to comfort them, telling them to take care of themselves, but nothing could fill the emptiness left behind. As time went on, the search grew harder. The news stations stopped calling and people began moving on with their lives. But for her parents, time seemed frozen. Every sound, every unknown number on the phone, every child's laughter in the distance reminded them of what they had lost. Yet, through all the heartbreak, they never stopped believing she was alive. Sometimes her mother would visit the school, walking through the corridors, touching the lockers, and sitting on the same bench where her daughter once waited after class. The teachers were kind, but there was always sadness in their eyes when they saw her. She would thank them and quietly walk away, holding on to hope like it was the only thing keeping her standing. Her father started keeping a notebook, writing down every single clue, no matter how small. Addresses, phone numbers, names of people who had called. It all went into that book. He carried it everywhere. To anyone else it might have looked like random scribbles, but to him it was a map of faith, a record of his promise that he would find her. Even in moments when despair almost took over, there was always something, small sign, a kind stranger, a comforting word, that reminded them to keep going. Her parents leaned on each other, their love for their daughter holding them together when everything else seemed broken. They believed that one day somehow they would see her again. Every night before sleeping, her mother would whisper, "We're still looking for you. We'll never stop." Her father would quietly nod beside her. The small light by the window stayed on, flickering softly in the dark, a beacon for a little girl who hadn't come home yet. And though the world outside moved on, inside that small house time stood still, waiting for the day when that light would no longer need to burn because their daughter would finally be home again. Months passed, but the pain in their hearts did not fade. The missing posters were now worn out from the rain and wind, but her parents refused to take them down. They replaced them with new ones every few weeks, making sure her picture stayed visible everywhere. People in town still remembered her face, though the talk about her had slowly quieted down. Life moved on for others, but for her parents, time was stuck on that one terrible day. Every morning began the same way. Her father would open his notebook, check his list of numbers, and make calls to anyone who might know something. Some days he would drive miles away to follow a lead that turned out to be nothing. But even when disappointment hit him again and again, he never stopped trying. His car became his second home, filled with maps, coffee cups, and flyers with his daughter's photo printed in black and white. Her mother stayed home most days, answering calls and managing the small website they had created to spread awareness. She had learned to use the internet just so she could post updates and connect with other families who had lost their children too. She found comfort in knowing she wasn't alone. There were others like her, parents who woke up every day hoping for a miracle. They shared their stories with each other, and together they became a small community of broken hearts still beating with hope. But there were days when even hope felt heavy. Some nights her mother would sit by the window staring at the empty street, asking herself where her daughter might be. Was she safe? Was she scared? Did she still remember them? Those questions had no answers, but she asked them anyway, like prayers whispered into the wind. Her father tried to stay strong, but there were moments when the silence of the house became too much. The laughter that once filled their rooms was gone, replaced by the ticking of a clock and the sound of rain hitting the roof. Yet, he couldn't give in to despair. He believed that if he stopped searching, even for one day, he might miss the chance to find her. So he kept going, even when his body was tired and his spirit felt weak. The local police still helped when they could, but as the months turned into years, the case grew cold. New cases came, new stories took the headlines, and slowly their daughter's disappearance became just another file in the corner of a dusty office. But her parents didn't let it stay that way. They wrote letters to news stations, begging them to feature her story again. Sometimes it worked. A short segment would air, showing her photo and asking the public for help. And every time that happened, they received new calls, new clues, new reasons to keep believing. Once her father got a message from a small town hundreds of miles away. Someone thought they had seen a girl who looked just like her. Without waiting, he packed his bag and drove through the night. The whole way, he imagined how it would feel to finally see her again, to hold her, to tell her how much they had missed her. But when he arrived, his heart sank. The girl was about the same age, but it wasn't her. He thanked the person who made the call and drove back home in silence. His eyes were red, but not from lack of sleep, from heartbreak. Her mother waited by the door that night, just like she always did when he followed a lead. When she saw his face, she didn't need to ask. She simply hugged him and whispered, "Next time. Maybe next time." Those words became their quiet promise to each other. They knew they couldn't stop now, not when every day might bring the clue that would change everything. Years went by. The once young parents now had gray in their hair and lines around their eyes. But the fire in their hearts remained. They started volunteering for a group that helped find missing children. They wanted to help others the way no one had been able to help them. Through their work, they met families who had gone through the same pain. Some had found their children after many years. Those stories gave them strength. If others could be reunited, maybe they could too. Sometimes the search took them far away. They traveled to other cities, sometimes even to other countries, chasing rumors or matching descriptions. Each trip carried a mix of hope and fear. Hope that this would be the moment they had been waiting for, and fear that it would only end in disappointment again. Yet even through all the heartbreak, they found kindness along the way. Strangers who helped them, officers who refused to give up, and families who opened their doors to them during their search. Those small acts of kindness reminded them that the world still had good people in it. Back home, their daughter's room remained untouched. Her books, her toys, her favorite pink sweater, everything stayed the same. Her mother cleaned the room every week, dusting the shelves and changing the bedsheets as if she might come back at any moment. Sometimes she would sit on the edge of the bed, close her eyes and imagine her daughter walking in with her backpack, telling her about her day at school. Those moments hurt, but they also kept her alive inside her mother's heart. Her father, on the other hand, found strength in doing. He organized search events, raised money for missing child organizations, and even gave speeches to encourage others not to give up. When he spoke, his voice carried both pain and hope, a mix that touched everyone who listened. People would come up to him afterward, some crying, some thanking him for sharing his story. Many said his courage gave them strength to keep fighting for their own loved ones. But behind that strength, there was always sadness. Every night when he sat down to write in his notebook, he still felt the same emptiness he had felt on the first day. The pages were filled with years of effort, but still no answers. Sometimes he wondered if his daughter would even recognize them if they ever found her. It had been so long, would she remember their faces? Their voices? But then he would look at her photo and smile. "Of course she will," he would whisper to himself. "She's our daughter." There were moments of hope too. Once, a kind journalist decided to retell their story. The article spread online, reaching thousands of people. Messages started pouring in from all over. People offering prayers, others sharing similar stories. It reminded them that they weren't forgotten, that their fight still mattered. Hope returned to their home, at least for a little while. One night, as her mother watched the small light by the window flicker in the dark, she felt something different. The wind outside was calm, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel only sadness. She felt strength. She realized that even though years had passed, they had built something from their pain, a mission, a purpose, a way to help others. And somewhere deep down, she believed her daughter would feel that love wherever she was. They went to sleep that night holding hands, as they had done every night since the day she disappeared. And even though the search seemed endless, they both knew one thing. As long as they were alive, they would keep looking. They had lost many things over the years, but they had never lost hope. And that hope, fragile yet unbroken, would soon lead them to something they could never have imagined. A clue that would finally bring light back into their world. Years slowly slipped away like pages in an old book. The days looked the same, but the seasons kept changing. Spring brought flowers that bloomed outside their window, but the house remained quiet. Summer came with laughter from the neighborhood children, reminding them of the voice they missed most. Winter arrived again, cold and heavy, and yet the little light by the window still burned every night just as it always had. It had been 10 long years since their daughter disappeared. 10 years of waiting, searching, and hoping. The pain never went away, but it had changed. It no longer screamed inside their hearts. It lived there quietly, like a shadow that followed them everywhere. They had learned to smile again, but the sadness behind their smiles never truly left. Their daughter's room still looked the same. Her mother never had the heart to change it. The walls were painted soft yellow with stickers of stars near the ceiling. Her toys were neatly arranged on the shelves, and her favorite teddy bear still sat on the bed. Every year on her birthday, her mother would place a small cake on the bedside table and light one candle. She would whisper a prayer, sometimes through tears, asking for just one thing: that her little girl was safe somewhere. Her father had grown quieter over the years. His hair had turned gray around the edges, and his face carried lines of exhaustion. But he still opened his notebook every morning. The pages were old and filled with names, numbers, and clues, but they were also filled with his heart. Each line represented a moment of hope. Each name was a door he had knocked on, searching for the truth. He had changed jobs, taken extra work just to fund their searches. The savings that once were meant for family vacations and school fees now went into printing flyers, paying for private investigators, and traveling to different cities. But he never complained. To him, every sacrifice was worth it, because one day it might bring her back. Her mother had become known in the community as the woman who never stopped searching. She had joined online groups for missing children and offered comfort to new families who were going through what she once had. Sometimes she would visit police stations with them, teaching them how to push for answers, how to stay strong. She had turned her pain into purpose. But even as she helped others, her own wound remained open. Every evening, after all her work was done, she would sit by the window, holding the same teddy bear she used to give her daughter when she was afraid of the dark. She would stare at the sky and imagine her daughter looking at the same stars somewhere far away. It was a small thought, but it brought her peace. She believed that as long as they kept their love alive, her daughter would somehow feel it no matter where she was. Sometimes they received letters from strangers who said they were inspired by their strength. Some shared stories of how they had found missing family members after many years. Those letters gave them courage. They pinned each one on a small board in the kitchen. A wall of hope, they called it. Over time, that wall became covered with notes, prayers, and messages from people they had never met, but who believed in them. But the truth was, there were still days when the pain was unbearable. There were mornings when her mother didn't want to get out of bed, and nights when her father sat silently in the dark, staring at the empty hallway. Sometimes they argued, not out of anger, but out of frustration and helplessness. They missed her differently, but both missed her completely. And no matter how much time passed, that missing part of their hearts never healed. One evening, her father was sitting at the dining table, flipping through his notebook. He noticed how many years had passed since he started writing in it. The first few pages were filled with hope, every line sharp and confident. But as the years went on, his handwriting had changed. The letters looked tired, shaky, sometimes written late at night when his eyes were red from crying. He closed the book and placed his hand on the cover, whispering softly, "I'm not done yet." Her mother walked in and placed a cup of tea beside him. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. After so many years together, they had learned to speak without words. She sat across from him and watched the candle flicker on the table. "Do you think she still remembers us?" she asked quietly. He looked up, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I don't know," he said, "but I know we'll remember her, always." That night after they went to bed, her mother had a dream. She saw her daughter standing by the window, smiling just like she used to. The dream felt so real that when she woke up, her pillow was wet with tears. She didn't tell her husband right away, but something inside her shifted. She felt that the time for answers was coming, though she couldn't explain why. A few months later, they decided to organize a memorial walk for missing children in their area. Dozens of families joined them, holding candles and photos of their loved ones. The sight was both heartbreaking and beautiful. As they walked down the street, her mother realized how much they had created out of their pain. Their daughter's story had become a symbol, not just of loss, but of love that never gave up. After the walk, a young reporter came up to them and asked if she could write about their journey. They agreed, thinking it would help spread awareness again. The article was simple, but powerful. It told the story of two parents who refused to stop believing even after 10 years. The piece spread online, and once again people from different towns and even countries started sending them messages. Some were just words of kindness, while others claimed to have seen a girl who resembled their daughter. Most of those leads turned out to be false, but her father followed each one anyway. He told himself that he'd rather chase 100 wrong leads than miss the one that could be right. That's how deep his love ran. It didn't care about exhaustion or disappointment. It only cared about bringing his little girl home. Then one day, while her mother was checking emails from the missing persons page she managed, she saw a message that made her heart race. It was from a social worker in another state. The message said that a young woman had been found who had no clear memories of her childhood. She had seen their daughter's photo online and felt something familiar about it. The message was short, polite, and cautious, but it felt different from all the others. For the first time in years, her mother felt a spark of something she had almost forgotten. Real, trembling hope. She called her husband immediately. He read the message twice, then 3 times. He didn't say much at first. He just stared at the screen, his hands shaking slightly. Finally, he said, "Let's find out." They contacted the social worker the same evening. The woman explained that the young lady was safe but unsure about her past. She had been trying to trace her childhood, and one of her friends had shown her their missing child story online. There was a resemblance, not perfect, but enough to raise questions. The social worker suggested a DNA test to be sure. The days that followed felt like the longest of their lives. Her parents tried not to get too excited, but deep down, they couldn't stop imagining the possibility. Could it really be her? After all these years? They barely slept, barely ate. Her father kept pacing the floor and her mother prayed every few hours. The world around them seemed to fade. Only this moment mattered now. As they waited for the results, her mother looked at the little light by the window. It had burned every night for 10 years. She whispered softly, "If it's really you, my love, we're ready." And somewhere far away in a quiet town, a young woman sat with a photograph in her hands. A photo of 2 people smiling beside a little girl. Something deep in her heart stirred, like a forgotten melody returning after years of silence. The wait was almost over. The days that followed were the hardest and longest of their lives. Every hour felt like a week. Every ring of the phone made their hearts jump. They tried to stay calm, telling themselves not to expect too much. They had been disappointed too many times before. But deep inside, something felt different this time. There was a quiet certainty in their hearts that they couldn't explain. Her father still opened his old notebook each morning, flipping through the pages filled with years of hope and heartbreak. This time, however, the pages felt lighter. Maybe it was because he finally believed one of those notes might lead to the ending he had been dreaming of for a decade. Her mother spent her time sitting near the window, just like she always did. But now there was a small smile on her face. She would look at the flickering light by the window and whisper, "We're close, I can feel it." The social worker stayed in touch with them every day. She was kind, gentle, and careful with her words. She didn't promise anything, but she made sure they understood that this young woman truly wanted to know who she was. The girl, who was now in her late teens, had grown up believing she was abandoned as a baby. But certain memories had started coming back. Flashes of a yellow-painted room, a woman singing softly, a teddy bear on a bed. None of it made sense to her until she saw their daughter's picture online. Something deep inside told her she had seen that face before, not in real life but in her dreams. Her parents agreed to the DNA test immediately. The process was simple, but the waiting was unbearable. The samples were sent off, and the social worker promised to call as soon as the results were ready. Her father tried to keep busy by organizing papers and cleaning his desk, but he kept glancing at the phone every few minutes. Her mother baked bread, folded clothes, even started planting flowers in the garden again, anything to keep her hands from trembling. But no matter what they did, their minds kept drifting back to one single question. What if it's really her? A week passed, then another. By the 10th day, her father could barely sleep. Every time the phone rang, his heart raced so fast he could hardly speak. Most calls were from friends or reporters who had heard about the story again online, but none were the call. Then one evening, as the sun was setting, the phone finally rang. The number they had been waiting for appeared on the screen. Her father froze for a moment. He looked at his wife. She could see it in his eyes. It was time. He picked up the phone, his voice trembling as he said hello. On the other end, the social worker spoke softly. "I have the results." The silence that followed felt endless. Her mother's hands gripped the edge of the table, her eyes wide and filled with tears even before hearing the words. And then, the social worker said, "It's a match." Her mother let out a small gasp and covered her mouth. Her father couldn't move. For a few seconds, it didn't even feel real. They had imagined this moment 1,000 times, and yet, when it finally came, it felt too big for words. The social worker continued speaking, explaining details, arranging the meeting, but they barely heard anything after that. All they could think about was one thing. She's alive. She's really alive. They sat in silence after the call, tears streaming down their faces. It wasn't the loud kind of crying. It was the quiet, shaking kind that comes from years of holding everything in. Her mother finally whispered, "She's coming home." Her father nodded, his voice breaking. "We did it. We never stopped, and we found her." The meeting was set for the following week at a small community center in the town where the young woman was living. The days leading up to it were a blur. They prepared carefully, not knowing what to expect. Her mother packed a small gift, the teddy bear from her daughter's old room, washed and wrapped in soft paper. Her father printed the last family photo they had taken before she disappeared, placing it in a frame. They didn't know if she remembered them or if she even wanted to come home right away, but they wanted her to have something that reminded her of love. The morning of the reunion, her father drove carefully, though his hands were trembling on the steering wheel. The road stretched out endlessly ahead of them, and the air inside the car was filled with both excitement and fear. Her mother kept holding the teddy bear close to her chest, staring out the window. Neither spoke much. Words felt too small for what they were about to experience. When they finally arrived, they parked near the community center. The building looked simple, quiet, surrounded by trees. The social worker met them outside and gave them a warm, reassuring smile. "She's inside," she said softly. Her parents nodded, unable to speak. Their legs felt weak as they followed her down the hall, and then in a small room filled with soft light they saw her. She stood by the window, her back turned at first. When she turned around, time seemed to stop. Her mother gasped softly, covering her mouth again, just like she had when she heard the test results. The young woman looked nervous, her eyes unsure, but in them was something familiar, a light they both recognized instantly. Her father took a slow step forward. His voice cracked as he whispered, "It's you." For a moment, no one moved. Then tears started falling down her face. She didn't speak. She just walked toward them, slow at first, then faster, until she was in her mother's arms. The three of them held each other tightly, crying without words. The world around them faded away. For the first time in 10 years, their family was whole again. They spent hours talking that day, softly, carefully, learning about the years they had lost. She told them bits and pieces of what she remembered. She had grown up far away, under another name, always feeling that something was missing. She said she used to dream about a house with a yellow room, a window light that never went out, and a woman who sang to her. When she saw the photo online, everything suddenly made sense. She said it felt like remembering something her heart had known all along. Her parents listened, holding her hands the entire time. They didn't ask too many questions, they just wanted her to feel safe. There would be time later for details, for explanations. Right now, they just wanted to look at her, to memorize her face, her voice, her smile. Her mother kept brushing her hair gently as if afraid she might disappear again. Her father sat quietly, tears glistening in his eyes, unable to stop smiling through them. Before they left, her mother handed her the teddy bear. The young woman looked at it and smiled softly. "I remember this," she said. Her mother's tears fell again and she whispered, "It was waiting for you." That night, when they finally returned home, they turned off the light by the window for the first time in 10 years. The house, once heavy with sadness, now felt full again. Her laughter echoed through the rooms, and though there were still many things to heal and understand, one truth shone brighter than anything else. She was home. For her parents, the pain of all those years didn't vanish, but it changed. It became gratitude. They had proven that love could outlast time, distance, and even silence. Their search had ended, but their story had just begun again, not as a tale of loss, but as one of faith that never faded. And as they sat together that night, her father looked at the window, now dark for the first time in years, and whispered, "We kept the light on for you, and you found your way back." When the door opened that morning, everything felt unreal. The air in the room was still, like time itself had stopped to witness what was about to happen. The woman who stepped in looked nervous. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the strap of her bag. Her eyes darted around the room, and then she saw them. Her parents stood there frozen, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. For a second it was silent. Then her mother let out a sound, a mix of laughter and crying, and rushed forward before anyone could say a word. She threw her arms around her daughter, holding her as tightly as she could, as if afraid she might disappear again. Tears ran down both their faces. Her father stood beside them, his hands shaking as he reached out to touch her shoulder, almost afraid that this moment might vanish like a dream. It was her, it really was her. The girl they had searched for, prayed for, hoped for all these years was finally home. For a long while, no one spoke. There were only tears and small whispers, words that didn't need to make sense. After all those years of pain, all those nights of wondering, they were finally together again. She had grown into a young woman now. Her face had changed, but her eyes still had something familiar, something they had never forgotten. The same warmth, the same gentle light. She looked at her parents, and her voice trembled as she spoke. I didn't know you never stopped looking." Her mother's hand went to her face, brushing away a strand of hair. "We never stopped," she said softly. "Not for a single day." The social worker who stood nearby quietly left the room, giving them privacy. This wasn't a moment for outsiders. It belonged only to them, to a family that had been torn apart but never gave up on finding one another. They spent hours talking, sharing pieces of the missing years. Her parents learned that she had been taken far away when she was very young. The person who had raised her told her a story that wasn't true, one she had believed for most of her life. She had always felt like something was missing, like she didn't quite belong anywhere. It was only when she found a photo online, one that looked too much like her childhood face, that she began to search for answers. It wasn't easy for her either. She had memories that didn't make sense. Flashes of a home she couldn't recall clearly, dreams that felt too real. When she saw her parents' old campaign online, her picture on a missing children page, her heart started racing. Something inside her said, "That's me." The DNA test had confirmed what her heart already knew. Rebuilding wasn't simple. The first few days together were full of joy and tears, but also awkward pauses. So much time had passed, years they could never get back. Her parents wanted to hold her all the time, but they were careful not to push too much. She, too, was trying to understand her own emotions. She loved them instantly, but it also felt strange, like meeting people she had always known in another lifetime. They spent long evenings sitting together, looking at old photos, telling stories. Her mother showed her the box of things they had kept all those years. Her little shoes, her favorite hair clip, drawings she had made when she was small. Each item carried a memory. Her father showed her the thick notebook where he had written every lead, every place they had searched. She touched the pages gently and whispered, "You really never stopped." He smiled through tears. "Never, we couldn't. You were always our daughter. Nothing could change that." Neighbors came to visit, some crying openly, some just smiling with disbelief. The story spread through the town, and soon people everywhere were talking about the miracle reunion. But for the family, fame didn't matter. What mattered was that after years of emptiness, their home finally felt alive again. She started joining her parents in the organization they had built for missing children. Together, They worked to help other families going through the same nightmare they once lived. Whenever they met parents who had lost hope, her father would say, "Don't stop searching. We found our daughter after all these years. You can too." Her story inspired many. News stations came to film interviews, but they kept their answers simple. They didn't talk about revenge or anger. They only talked about hope. Her mother said, "The world is full of pain, but it's also full of miracles. You just have to keep believing." As the months passed, they learned to live as a family again. There were small, ordinary moments that meant everything. Morning tea at the kitchen table, laughter over old stories, quiet walks in the park. Her room, which had been untouched for years, was finally filled with life again. She hung up new photos on the wall but kept her old teddy bear on the bed. Sometimes, late at night, she would sit by the window with her mother. The same window where a light had been kept burning all those years. She asked one evening, "You always kept it on?" Her mother nodded. "Every night. I thought if you ever came back, you'd see it and know the way home." There was a long pause before she whispered, "You can turn it off now." Her mother smiled faintly, eyes shining with tears. "Maybe just for tonight," she said, reaching out to switch it off. The room went dark, but it wasn't empty anymore. The darkness felt peaceful because this time, it wasn't filled with waiting. It was filled with love. Over time, they visited the places where the search had once led them. Fields, small towns, even the old police station. Each visit felt like closing a chapter that had been left open for too long. Her father said it helped him heal. The family began to travel together. They didn't talk about the missing years as much anymore. They focused on new memories. Every time they took a picture, her mother would say, "This one is for the years we lost." And slowly, life became normal again, not the same as before, but maybe even more meaningful. They had been through something that had broken them, but also made them stronger. Her parents often said that what kept them going wasn't just faith, it was love. Love that didn't fade with time, love that refused to give up even when the world told them to. Now, whenever people ask her how she feels, she says, "Grateful." Not just because she was found, but because she was never forgotten. Because two people against all odds kept a promise, they never stopped searching. And in a quiet corner of their home, that old lamp still sits by the window. Most nights it stays off, but sometimes when her parents are reminded of how far they've come, they turn it on again, not because they're waiting anymore, but to remind themselves of the light that never gave up. That light, once a symbol of hope, has now become a symbol of love, one that guided a lost daughter back home, proving that even after the longest darkness, love can still find its way.